Love Written and Read, Part 2. Betrayal. Matthew 26:47-50 says, While he was speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd with swords and clubs, from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, The one I will kiss is the man. Seize him. And he came up to Jesus at once and sang, Greetings, Rabbi. And he kissed him. Jesus said to him, Friend, do what you came to do. Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. 30 pieces of silver was the price that would be paid for a slave at the time. Therefore, Judas sold Jesus out for the price of a slave. Imagine that for a moment. Have you ever been betrayed? Imagine if one of your closest friends did that to you. Would you still be able to love them? Because Jesus still loved Judas. He didn't curse his name. He never said he hated him. His love was unconditional. Even though it wasn't deserved, Jesus still loved him. Denial. Now Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard, and a servant girl came up to him and said, You also were with Jesus the Galilean. But he denied it before all of them, saying, I do not know what you mean. And when he went out to the entrance, another servant girl saw him, and she said to the bystanders, This man was with Jesus of Nazareth. And again he denied it with an oath, I do not know the man. After a little while, the bystanders came up and said to Peter, Certainly you too are one of them, for your accent betrays you. Then he began to invoke a curse upon himself and to swear, I do not know the man. And immediately the rooster crowed. And Peter remembered the saying of Jesus, Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. And that's from Matthew 26:69-75. We discussed how it would feel to have a friend betray you. Now imagine how it would feel to have a friend deny you. Imagine a time when you needed your friend. Now think about how it would feel if your friend denied even knowing you, if they denied being your friend at all. Just like with Judas, Jesus still loved Peter even after this. Beaten. The men who were guarding Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and demanded, Prophecy, who hit you? And they said many other insulting things to him. Luke 22:63-65. Trials. Now, I prophesized the trials because this is a lot of scripture, and I did not think it would fit on one slide. But I believe the meaning is still captured here. Jesus stood before many judges that night. Forgive my typo. He stood before Caiaphas, who was the high priest at the time. The goal of the religious leaders of the time was to discredit Jesus. He was getting in the way of their agendas. They wanted to find him guilty of something so that they would be able to put him to death and their problem would be solved. He was afterwards taken before Pontius Pilate, who was the Roman governor of Judea at the time. Pilate asked Jesus, Are you the king of the Jews? To which Jesus replied, You have said so. After learning he is Galilean, Pilate sent him to Herod, who was the Roman king of Judea. Jesus is questioned there, which he provides no answer to. Eventually, Herod sends Jesus back to Pilate. Pilate finds no grounds on which to convict him. He wanted to release Jesus, but the crowd desired to see him crucified. And that comes from Luke 22:66-71, and Luke 23:1-16, if you want to read the actual account of the trials. And in this, what we're seeing here, Jesus is being passed from trial to trial. They are trying anything they can to convict Jesus. He was innocent. They can't truly find anything to convict him of that was worthy of death. However, since Jesus is getting in the way of their agenda, they are determined to get rid of him. Barabbas. Now at the feast the governor was accustomed to release for the crowd any one prisoner whom they wanted. And they had then a notorious prisoner called Barabbas. So when they had gathered, Pilate said to them, "Whom do you want me to release for you, Barabbas or Jesus, who is called the Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had delivered him up. Besides, while he was sitting on the judgment seat, his wife sent word to him, "Have nothing to do with that righteous man, for I have suffered much because of him today in a dream." Now the chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowd to ask for Barabbas and destroy Jesus. The governor again said to them, "Which of the two do you want me to release for you?" And they said, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus, who is called the Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." And he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Let him be crucified." So when Pilate saw that he was gaining nothing, but rather that a riot was beginning, he took water and washed his hands before the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. See to it yourselves." All the people answered, "His blood be on us and our children." Then he released for them Barabbas, and having scourged Jesus, delivered him to be crucified. Barabbas was a murderer. He was a man guilty of evil. Yet the world embraced the evil man and rejected the good man. This seems to still happen today. I apologize, I thought I was going to sneeze. There is so much hatred towards Christ and Christianity in our world today. Our broken world tends to embrace evil and reject Christ. This sad picture is an illustration of what sometimes takes place in our world today. Our hearts should break for those who reject Christ. We should have them in our prayers and be witnessing to them so that they may understand and accept the love Christ has for them and the sacrifice he made for them. The previous verse speaks about Jesus being scourged. Jesus was whipped or scourged with something called the cat of nine tails. It was a leather whip. I apologize, just bear with me, y'all. With pieces of metal and bone attached to it. So not only is his skin being struck with a leather whip, it is also being ripped by bone and metal. He would have been beaten until he would likely have been unrecognizable.